the public interest. Thank you very much for joining us for another edition. On this week's edition, we will focus on Guyana's national defense policy. On the panel, as usual, is the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency, Brigadier David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Malika.
Great to have you. And joining us, we have two journalists. First of all, Ms. Michella Abraham Ali from the National Communications Network, NCN. Welcome, Michella.
Thank you, Malika.
And Mr. Christopher Chapwanya from NewsNow, and of course, most of you know him also, know his voice from Hard Talk. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Malika.
Great to have you. First off, Your Excellency, at this point, we know that you would have unveiled a policy on national defense for Guyana recently. Of course, you unveiled that on the 15th of October 2015. Would it be fair to say that in its current form, the Guyana Defense Force is not necessarily capable of repelling aggression, any aggression against the state?
No, that was not the purpose of the policy statement, and it would be fair to make such a conclusion. What has happened recently, particularly since September, is that the intensity of the claims on Guyanese territory, particularly from Venezuela and Suriname, dictated that the tempo of defense preparations should change. But in my view, the Defense Force at present is capable of performing its role, but we felt that some changes were needed, and those were the changes I announced. For example, strengthening the reserve and putting more emphasis on the technical core. It's just a question of emphasis, it's not a question of capability at this point in time.
How soon can Guyana expect to benefit from strengthening of the reserve?
The program is geared to be completed in 5 years, but there are certain benchmarks which have to be achieved by 2016, and the Chief of Staff is aware of the phase program for development. It's not going to be expensive. It's not a matter of enlarging the size of the force, it's a matter of improving the quality of the force.
All right. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Michella Abraham Ali to pose her first question on the current topic.
Thanks again, Malika. Thank you, Mr. President, for giving us the opportunity to chat on matters of public interest. Touching on that national defense policy that Malika started there just now, we are hearing of the re-establishment of the People's Militia, the National Cadet Corps, the Civil Defense Corps. Could you just identify or give highlights into the plans for those and when these are going to be rolled out?
As far as the militia is concerned, as you know, this was established in 1976. And in fact, Guyana had a militia for over 250 years from the time of the Dutch to the British period. And it was, I would say, renamed Guyana People's Militia in 1976. For some reason or the other, it was discontinued around 1997, and the numbers fell to maybe a fraction of what it used to be. So by re-establishing the People's Militia, we will ensure that there will be enough volunteers in all of the regions to assist the civil authority in the event of emergencies. For example, every region is being hit by floods, and we want to have a ready reserve which could respond to the needs of the various regions in the event of an emergency. So that's nothing new. It's simply bringing back onto the table something that was there before. As far as the National Cadet Corps is concerned, similarly, we had one as part of the Guyana People's Militia. This would encourage young people, boys and girls, to go camping, to do various forms of training, adventure, during their August holidays as part of schooling. This is nothing militaristic. It was there before, and we're simply reintroducing that. In the third case, the Civil Defense Commission, as you know, plays a very important role in providing supplies. Relief supplies in the event of an emergency. Again, Guyana now has been experiencing more frequent floods than ever before. And in the Rupununi, we even have a drought. Well, not even, everybody knows that there's a cycle of floods and droughts. The idea is that the Civil Defense Commission does not have sufficient personnel to administer these supplies, to get into the areas, so we're recruiting volunteers like the Red Cross, like St. John's Ambulance Brigade, people who would help the Civil Defense Commission to deliver relief supplies in the event of an emergency. So these are the significant personnel changes that will be taking place. I would call them auxiliaries to the Defense Force.
There's a timeline for that implementation?
Yes, we expect that within 12 months, all three will be up and running.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Chris, you're allowed to pose a question.
Thank you, Malaika. Thank you again, Mr. President, for affording us this opportunity. At the GDF meeting a few days ago, the new policy, it was reported, is supposed to be placing great focus on the reorganization and strengthening of the GDF. And you mentioned, Mr. President, 5 pillars: personnel, readiness, infrastructure, morale, and equipment. When you speak of changing the tempo, would this also entail re-equipping the Guyana Defense Force with more aircraft and more gunboats and so on to repel the obvious threats that we are facing right now?
Well, the 5 pillars you mentioned, PRIME, E means equipment, and GDF does need an aviation capability for surveillance and rescue. We're not talking about combat, we're talking about performing a role in national development and in supporting the civil power. So we do not envisage that we're going to be spending any money on combat aircraft. Similarly, in terms of the maritime capability, we want to be able to assist in the interdiction of pirates and poaching in our exclusive economic zone, protecting our resources. So we're not going to be making war against anybody, but certainly there's an equipment component, and equipment will be very expensive. It'll have to be phased over a long period of time. In essence, the entire plan is looking at 5 years, which is the period allocated to the life of the 11th Parliament that we're in at present. So I expect that by this time in 2020, most of the goals of that plan would be achieved.
Okay, in your opinion, Mr. President, is the GDF prepared now, or is part of this new policy envisioned over the next 5 years is supposed to prepare them for certain eventualities that we must acknowledge would have occurred in the past and may occur in the future? I reference the Rupununi Rebellion that occurred in the latter part of the 1960s. Based on reports and based on information in a book that you authored, sir, the Venezuelan authorities may have played a role in that regard. And with the ongoing claims by Venezuela, should something similar to that happen in the present or near future, how prepared is our defense force to repel that?
At present, the Guyana Defense Force has the capability to deploy troops to any part of the country. Even places which may be inaccessible, they have paratroopers, they have jungle soldiers who can penetrate any part of the country. So I'm very confident, but this is not a situation that can continue forever. New soldiers have to be recruited, new equipment has to be provided, so that they could be kept abreast of any changes in the strategic scenario in terms of the need for deployment. You know, we need to build infrastructure. We need to ensure that there are boats to take them to destinations along the coast, that there are aircraft. And that is one of the reasons why we want to develop the technical core as well, because the technical core, particularly Air, Coast Guard, and Engineer, would be concerned in getting the soldiers to their destination. But right now, the GDF is quite capable.
Mr. President, given that you've talked about this upgrading and reorganizing of the Guyana Defense Force, of course it's public, we have the reports out there. Are you expecting Venezuela to show more aggression, and to some extent Suriname also, given the recent unveiling of these plans?
We do not expect that our relations with those two countries would deteriorate. Right now, the United Nations Secretary General is playing a very important role in ensuring that the tension is kept, the lid is kept on the tension. In fact, only this week we had a team from the office of the Secretary General. So we don't expect that there's going to be conflict, but it is going to be prudent for us as a nation to be alert, to be aware of the possibility of a claim which has existed in both cases for 50 years. Because almost simultaneously in 1965, both countries revived their claims, and it has never really gotten better. So our mission now is to prevent it from getting worse. I don't think that there's going to be a dramatic change next year or the year after next, but we have to be alert. We have to assure Guyanese citizens that there's a force out there which will protect them. And that is the duty of the defense force. It's not going to make war, it's not going to invade anyone, but we want to assure Guyanese citizens that we are not asleep and that we are going to protect their territory and protect their lives.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, you have an opportunity to pose further questions on this set topic.
I'm glad that we're talking defense and public defense and so forth, Mr. President. And you being a military scholar, a historian, obviously we've just heard highlights of the national defense policy. But sir, how do you feel about the growing disappointment and expressions of discontent with your administration in light of the salary increases with the ministers? How do you see that impacting the sense of patriotism that we're supposed to have, the belief and the protection of national defense at this time?
I don't link the two, but I don't believe that the increases in ministers' salaries will lead to any disaffection or any lack of patriotism. What I feel is that as far as the salaries were concerned, a decision was taken. We had to make some choices, and the choices were made in order to assure the public of the efficiency and the commitment of the ministers, and I think that has been done. I am aware of the criticism, but we had to make choices, and the choice was made in favor of having a stronger cabinet among our 6 partners and allowing those persons who have been selected to fulfill their functions. And I'm confident that this will be done. In the middle term, I believe people see that as a good decision.
I'd like us to stay on the Venezuelan issue for a little while. Chris, do you a little while longer? Because this really and truly is a major issue and it affects our country in general. Chris, do you have further questions on this and
yes,
upgrading
I
the
have a couple
force?
of questions more on the GDF and the Venezuela-Guyana issue. On the GDF, we know, Mr. President, that in the past, when the crime situation would have worsened in Guyana, the then administration would have resorted in some cases to having a collaborative effort between the Guyana Defense Force and the Guyana Police Force out there in communities such as Buxton, for instance. They had a prolonged presence. Could we expect to see such collaboration now that the crime situation seems to be out of control?
Well, I don't think it's out of control. The crime situation is out of control. But as far as the collaboration is concerned, this has always existed. As you know, Guyana had a history of disturbances during the 1960s, 50s and 60s, and there was always a British presence here between 1953 to 1966. There were about 20 British regiments down here, not all at the same time. But during that period, a tradition of collaboration developed, and they were always joint operations. In fact, there's a place in the police headquarters in Ivleri called the Joint Operations Center. So jointness is nothing new. As far as the troubles on the East Coast and elsewhere are concerned, there was a high level of collaboration, but in our military or defense teaching or doctrine, the defense force is only deployed in support of the police. It is the police under the Police Act which has responsibility for maintenance law and order, for apprehension of offenders, for law enforcement. The defense force doesn't have these powers. And when a soldier gets involved in arresting a criminal, the regime is quite different. So the police have to do policing work, and our doctrine is quite clear that only when the police have exhausted their resources should a request be made to the defense force to provide support. So we shouldn't confuse the two. And in my view, it is unwise to deploy the defense force prematurely before the situation reaches a stage that the police cannot handle. Let us use the police for policing. The defense force has its work cut out in the border and the hinterland. That is what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to distinguish between the two forces. They're not one and the same. They're not interchangeable.
Has any such request been made, Mr. President, by the Guyana Police Force for support? The police force itself recently indicated that a total of 114 murders, for instance, were recorded at the end of September in comparison to just 109 the previous year. This represents a 5% increase. They're saying, the Guyana Police Force itself, that overall at the end of September, the force recorded a 10% increase in serious crimes in comparison to the same period last year. Is the country in the grip of another crime wave, and should the police be seeking more assistance?
I don't think we are in the grip of another crime wave. It's a continuing crime wave that started to develop around 2001, 2002. And if you look at the numbers now, it is true that they are not any better than in 2002 when, of course, you had people like Fine Man alive. What has happened is that the police force needs to be reformed to be empowered, to be enabled to do its job more efficiently. And the great error was made a few years ago when the previous administration did not accept the Security Sector Reform Action Plan. And a few weeks ago when I was in the United Nations, I met Prime Minister David Cameron of the United Kingdom, and I specifically asked him to his face to restore the Security Sector Reform Action Plan. Crime will continue to be a problem until we reform the police force. The police force needs better equipment, modern equipment. The police force needs to be brought up to strength. The same thing I'm trying to do with the GDF. I'm not trying to have an overstrength police force, but right now my information is that it's about 20% on the strength. The police force needs to be deployed to the areas where some of the serious crimes occur, for example, the hinterland. And I would like the public to know that the commander of F Division, that whole hinterland, made up of regions 1, 7, 8, and 9, the commander is now based at Bartica. We intend to give him boats, we intend to give him aircraft to allow him to do his work properly. So we expect that in the fullness of time, the country will be safer. We need a police force that could prevent gun running. We need a police force that could prevent people trafficking. We need a police force that is out there and actively enforcing the law. And this is what I think we are going to achieve. So I'm not particularly worried. The crime situation will not get better until the police force gets better. I set up something called the NSC, the National Security Committee, and we meet every week with the Commissioner, with the Chief of Staff, with the Vice President of Public Security, with the Prime Minister, with the Minister of Legal Affairs, to devise ways and means of ensuring the crime situation doesn't get out of control. And I think that some of the measures that you've seen, the gun amnesty and all that, will eventually work. They will eventually work. We're working on it. We're not ignoring crime.
Mr. President, before we have to move on to another segment, I know you have appointed various ministers and various officials to carry out certain functions and certain duties. But I must ask you, in the case of Guyana's ambassador to Venezuela, obviously there is still, even though you've said all that you've said in terms of what you're expecting and what you're not expecting regarding Venezuela's current claim to Guyana's lands, are there measures being put in place to ensure that our ambassador to Venezuela has somewhat of a smooth transmission, because the grounds are shaky, so there's a certain threat looming, even if it's only in the minds? Is there a position that she will have a smooth transition in terms of going over to Venezuela to carry on her duties?
I'm not sure I follow the question. She was the ambassador to Venezuela before. She's an experienced diplomat. And having met with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon at the United Nations, President Maduro did agree that application for agrément could be made. And I did sign that application a few days ago. So I expect that her entry into Caracas would be quite smooth. But right now she had not been employed by the state for some time since her last appointment. So I expect that things will go smoothly from now on.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, sir. Well, let's now move on to the other segment. You're now free to pose other questions, beginning with you, Michella.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on an admission made just now, Mr. President, about crime in the hinterland, and specifically the Camarang, Mazaruni, Akawayo people. Of course, their livelihood depends on hunting and on their farms and so on. They surrendered their illegal guns during the recent amnesty. Is the administration looking into issues like these and granting gun licenses in a timely manner?
Well, that's a very good question. Illegal means illegal. And they were quite in order to surrender illegal weapons, because if they were caught with illegal weapons, they could be prosecuted for having committed a crime. But we are very sympathetic to the case. Generally speaking, I don't want to mention individual cases. Generally speaking, we know many of the indigenous people depend on shotguns for hunting, because that would supplement their diet at home. So the matter was discussed at Cabinet, and the Vice President for Public Security has been asked to invite the persons from the hinterland who have surrendered illegal firearms to make formal applications. So we are going to fast track those applications with the aim of giving them legal weapons or legalizing the ownership of their weapons. So this will happen sooner rather than later. We're working on it. We know that the livelihood of some of the families, some of the households depend on shotguns. But illegal is illegal, so we cannot ignore the fact that some of the shotguns were illegal. But we are going to regularize their ownership within a very short period of time. And Cabinet is on it, and the Minister, I can assure you, Minister Ramjatan is on it too.
Mr. President, moving on from the crime situation, while the administration has given itself an A+ on delivering on its 100-day plans, there are still some promises that were not kept, namely the reduction of tolls for the Berbice Bridge. Minister of State Joseph Harmon recently told NewsNow that government is open to the possibility of buying out the Berbice Bridge once the shareholder should offer sales at a reasonable price. Is this the official position, sir, and has any movement been taken in this regard?
When the Minister of State makes a pronouncement, it's official. And this is, although it's official, it's a work in progress. The Minister of Finance is in negotiation with the company. And our intention is to make sure that the residents of East Berbice Quarantine would have access to a reasonably priced toll, a reasonable rate of toll on that Berbice River Bridge. This is a commitment that we gave. We have not been able to fulfill it, but everyone knows that we've been trying to bring about a reduction in a legal and official manner, rather than trying to do it in any other different way. So we expect that after the negotiations, there will be a settlement which is favorable to the residents of East Berbice Quarantine. It was a problem, and I've met lots of residents, I've met school children who feel that the toll was unbearable and intolerable. So we had to respond to that.
Mr. President, is it a situation in which the administration, well, the then APNU ASC coalition, did not carefully study the mechanisms that surrounds the Berbice River Bridge and the company when this promise was made? Or did you anticipate that the company itself would have been willing to listen to the government and reduce the tolls? Because government, the then opposition, was adamant that tolls would be reduced. Minister of Foreign Affairs, current Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Carl Greenwich, told me on Hard Talk that there are a number of measures open to government for the tolls being reduced, and he left one measure open: coercion.
Well, we don't want to apply coercion, but we did expect that because of the weight of government's involvement in the ownership of the bridge, that the transition would have been more smooth. That is to say that we would not have had to go through this ordeal, because maybe, I wouldn't call it naive, but it was assumed that the company directors would have been more compliant with the wishes of the government in the public interest. But that has not happened. But we have not tried to use a sledgehammer. We have tried to enter into negotiations. And my information is that those negotiations are continuing.
All right.
We're still
Yes,
conversing
Mr.
on
Lear,
matters,
yes, you go ahead.
on matters of public interest. So from that, sir, I just wanted to say that you can continuously call for national unity, and with our imminent 50th independence anniversary ahead of us, how are you moving on with that call for national unity with the opposition when they seem so reluctant to share that space and to share that vision with you?
I do not feel that the opposition is reluctant to share the vision. An opposition is an opposition, and I don't expect them to agree with everything we say. I don't expect them to be compliant. But the criticisms, we hear their criticisms, and as far as the celebrations are concerned, they are now at a stage, and I expect that by the 1st of November, the opposition would be participating more fully. We did meet with the leader of the opposition soon after, within a fortnight of his being elected. And I would say the ball is in his court. There is what I call a high-level contact. Whenever he wants to contact us, he knows how to do that, and whenever we want to contact him, we know how to do that. But we want bipartisanship. The celebration is national. It is focused on national unity. And we believe that the opposition will be more cooperative when the committees under that commemoration commission are fully established by the 1st of November. I had a meeting quite recently with the minister, and plans are afoot. And we now have a very short period left, about 7 months. And the opposition will be invited, and I expect them to be fully involved. I don't think there'll be any resistance. It's a national celebration. And
a follow-up to that would be the opposition and their work in the committees of parliament. Mm-hmm. How is that going, and has there been, and is government prepared to compromise when it comes to the work of the commissions and the work of parliament generally?
Well, we'll have to see how that goes. Right now they're in recess. I don't know any committees are functioning. But this recess ends next week, Thursday, the 22nd of October. And I expect to address Parliament on that date on matters of public interest. But oppositions, throughout history will behave in a certain way, and I don't expect that their behavior is going to be any different from the way opposition behaved in the past.
So you want to see a change of behavior, however?
I would certainly like to see a more collaborative approach. I would like to see, as I announced at first, a government of national unity. But that is unlikely to happen now. But the time will come when we see our present coalition expand. Right now we have 6 parties. There's only one party of significance outside of the coalition, and that is the PPP. The door is open, as I always say, for them to have a more collaborative relationship with the government. Right now, of course, the cabinet positions have been allocated, and the government is functioning. But I would like to see a much more collaborative approach with Mr. Jagdew and the PPP.
The final question goes to you, Chris.
Mr. President, when you take into consideration, sir, the public outcry pertaining to the salary increases, and Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu said at a rally at WIM during the campaign that while he was a member of the PPP, he even decided not to take an increase in salary, because when you look at what teachers were getting and so on, it was not on par, and he felt that it was not justified. When you look at the current public outcry, not only from the public in general, but from APNU AFC supporters in particular, are you considering in any way, shape, or form to reverse that decision, sir?
It was a difficult choice in the first place. It is not something we made recklessly. We had to consider all of the options, and in the final analysis, we felt that this was a means of ensuring that the work of the cabinet, the work of the coalition would continue. I must point out that many of the members of the cabinet were professionals, and some came from private enterprise, And we felt that we had to make a sacrifice to get the best quality persons, and we needed to ensure that the standard of living did not suddenly collapse because they took up cabinet positions. So what we did is not the ultimate solution. Some of them are getting much less than they might have gotten in private life, but we are trying to ensure that the coalition cabinet is such that you know, there's a high level of efficiency. And we felt that this is the cost of having a coalition, this is the cost of having a cabinet of persons who are committed to the development of this country. I would even say that the changes have been an investment in quality governance. And I believe that in time to come, evidence will emerge that we made the correct decision.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Michella. Thank you, Christopher. His Excellency, President Brigadier David Granger, of course, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. This has been another edition of The Public Interest. Do join us again next time. I am Malika Ramsey. Goodbye.